The concept of alternate history or theorizing on what could have happened had key events went differently is nothing new. One of the first examples of recorded alternate history dates back to the 4th century BC in a book called Urbe Condita Libri. There, the Roman Historian Livy theorized what would happen if Alexander the Great had survived to attack Western Europe, as he originally had planned. As we all know, Alexander the Great died at a young age, so this never happened. If you're wondering, the book states that Rome would win, despite the Romans being a city-state in the 4th century BC. Very realistic. This alternate history scenario starts with Livy never writing Urbe Condita Libri, which would have a lot of implications, such as people being less curious. So, what if alternate history simply never existed? What if people just didn't care what could have happened if they altered the past and focused on improving their present and the future? Well, to start off with the obvious and then go down the iceberg, we can say that me and other alternate history YouTubers wouldn't be doing this, since there wouldn't be any market for it. As to how people can lose their curiosity of theorizing about the past, I'll tell you later. This video is about as realistic as the city-state of Rome beating the empire of Alexander the Great, then the Roman Empire would conquer the world. Honestly, this sounds very interesting, not going to lie. Well, if the people were to lose their curiosity somehow, this would have some really negative effects of civilization as a whole. Every invention came from solving a very specific problem. The invention of the wheel made transportation easier, and it meant that fewer workers can produce the same amount of goods. This resulted in people focusing not only to work their farm and survive, but also delving into arts and literature. If people aren't curious, then poetry is pretty much dead, as the poets would have to work their farm rather than to produce literature. This video is more about what if people stop being curious, but the title I chose is fitting more in my community. As to why humans, who are naturally very curious creatures, would ever stop being one, I can suggest something really interesting. Being curious doesn't help the empire in the short term. People are doing something else rather than working on the farms. But in the long run, it's better, as it allows for new inventions to be created, which makes working on the farms easier and more effective. If in the ancient times we had some people who would rule over powerful countries and think only in the short term, this can affect society. As for a realistic way on how this could happen, let's say that there is an ice age or a volcanic eruption or some sort of a natural disaster that wipes a large percentage of the human population on Earth. This would be detrimental to the rulers of their countries, so they would want to develop and bounce back as quickly as possible. Curiosity would be treated like a disease, just like it used to be for writing with your left hand. People's behavior is shaped by the things that they are rewarded and punished by doing. With curiosity maybe being punishable by death, we can assume that no such important inventions would come to life. As to why curiosity can be punished by death, you can imagine that people are working on the farms and somebody is just theorizing as to how they can make it easier, but not producing anything in the meantime. The most popular invention is the lightbulb, and it was such a good invention that it is used as a sign of a good idea. In fact, Thomas Edison, the inventor of the lightbulb, failed over 1,000 times until he discovered something that works, and today we use it every day. Some records say that he failed 2,774 times before his prototype was working as intended. If you were an ancient world, most likely you wouldn't allow for people to do such ideas, as you would prefer them to work on the farms, rather than to fail thousands of times just so they can maybe discover something useful. It's fair to say that humanity would just stall, and breaking out of the cycle is going to get increasingly more difficult as time goes on. All of the civilizations would be built wrong to begin with, and the people would have very negative view towards innovation and curiosity. Innovation would be avoided, so it would be greatly slowed down. The people wouldn't want to support somebody's innovation, as it can put them directly out of job. With every innovation, people have been replaced by some sort of technology, which radicalized them. While it sounds good not to theorize about the past and to simply be forward-thinking, it has some downsides. Now, to be clear, just because alternate history never existed, it doesn't necessarily mean that people would become less curious. I'm claiming that alternate history wouldn't exist exactly because people are less curious. It's not the causation of the problem, but the correlation. I think that by people theorizing about the past, it can improve the present. A simple example is that everyone can look at the mistakes they made in the past and correct them later. With the video's narrative, the same mistakes would be repeated, which leads to a weaker civilization overall. Since many nations were built wrong to begin with, introducing new ideas would be close to impossible. What needs to happen to fix this is that we need another humanitarian catastrophe, such as a volcano erupting and etc. Then the people toppled the ruling class and built new nations from the ground up. Paradoxically, the region on Earth that would be hit by such a disaster would wake the people up and allow them to innovate, so something bad would result in something really good later down the line. The Chinese civilizations didn't suffer from too many crises, same for the Arabian civilizations. I want to pick a really interesting national disaster that would kickstart all of these changes. This is the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. It would be the deadliest for its time and it would happen 400 years after I started this alternate history. It's also among the deadliest volcanic eruptions recorded ever in the world. This means that the Apennine Peninsula would be the first to start innovating and investing into the future, and be more forward-thinking. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius would also not only make people on the Apennine Peninsula innovate, but force them to do so, or else they would perish. This is because the eruption of the volcano formed a large ash cloud, which blocked the sun for several weeks. This is enough for all crops in the region to fail, so the eruption wouldn't be that deadly, but the famine would. I have thought of something that may interest you. The thermal energy of this explosion, which is a measurement, was 100,000 times higher than the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is not like nuclear bomb fell on the Apennine Peninsula. It was like hundreds of them dropped at the same time, which is more devastating than that. Let's not forget that after Japan was bombed, they started innovating and produced the most advanced technology pieces at the time. Same conditions would result in a similar behavior for this alternate Apennine nation. For the name of this nation, I happen to have a book of Latin phrases. So I opened it and the first phrase I saw was in limine, which means at the beginning, as preliminary matter, specifically before a particular procedure or proceeding takes place. I like it because it can mean in the beginning before the eruption, so it's something like a fresh start. This country on the Apennine Peninsula from now on I would call Liminia. So the citizens would start fleeing to other places where the small cloud doesn't block the sun that much. This would allow for them to expand and conquer quickly. As Liminia would introduce new ideas to the places that they had conquered, the natives would be skeptical, but they would see that it works. In this alternate timeline, Pompeii can become the capital of the Apennine Peninsula instead of Rome. Liminia would become the new name of Pompeii, and I would assume that they would have an easier time conquering than the Roman Empire had historically. The Liminian Empire can also reach the Baltic Sea, which the Romans couldn't do historically. While this quick expansion you may say is unsustainable, there is a big difference. Since the Liminian Empire would have forward-looking ideas, the lands they would conquer would adopt these new technologies, which would make them more profitable and self-sustaining. This means that literally the sky would be the limit for the rise of the Liminian Empire. What I try to say is that in this alternate history, it is possible that if people are less curious, which results in alternate history to never be theorized, the first country in the world to abolish this thinking would be in a position to conquer the entire world. This is especially true if the Liminian Empire improves their military, and considering that I'm basing them on the Roman Empire, they would have the same conditions to do so. They can really conquer everything. The other smaller nations would be simply conquered and couldn't resist, as they were too backwards thinking and focused on producing food. I would say that the Liminian Empire would have a very quick rise to power, but also a very quick collapse. Once the newly conquered nations adopt these new technologies and techniques, they would be seeking to separate themselves from the Liminian Empire. This time they would be successful, as they would have similar technologies and can resist more effectively. A popular idea is that if the Roman Empire had conquered lands more slowly, they would be more stable, and their collapse would be more delayed. The same situation applies here, just the opposite, as too many lands would be conquered too quickly. What happens after that is anyone's guess. Do me a favor and check this video about what if ChatGPT runs a country. Do you think that it can do better than our politicians? There is only one way to find out. Thank you for watching and I hope that you have an amazing day.